Secret room found in my building, nosleep. The silence of the apartment was crushing. It had been 6 weeks since the layoff, 6 weeks of sending out resumes that vanished into the digital ether. 6 weeks of staring at the same 4 walls. Sarah, bless her heart, tried to be supportive, but the worry lines around her eyes were deepening with each passing day. This building, this pre-war monolith in Uptown, was supposed to be charming. High ceilings, exposed brick vintage fixtures. Now, it just felt like a gilded cage. The radiators clanked and hissed at all hours, the floorboards groaned underfoot, and there was always a faint, musty smell that clung to everything. I was trying to fix a loose patch of plaster near the fireplace. Honestly, just anything to feel productive. Tapping around the area, I felt something give. Not the plaster, but a brick. One of the bricks in the wall of the fireplace. It wiggled slightly. Curiosity, mixed with a desperate need for distraction, took over. I pried the brick loose. It came out with a soft thud, revealing a dark, rectangular opening, big enough to stick my arm into. My heart pounded. What the hell? I grabbed a flashlight from the junk drawer and shined it into the opening. It revealed a small, cramped space, maybe 3 feet wide, 4 feet high, and a couple of feet deep. A hidden room. Dust motes danced in the beam of the flashlight. Inside, I could make out a few objects, a stack of yellowed papers, a tarnished metal box, and something that looked like tools. I hesitated. This was weird, really weird. But the boredom was a stronger force than my apprehension. I reached in and pulled out the box. It was heavy, made of some kind of dark metal, possibly steel or iron that had grown a thick layer of rust. Backing away from the wall, I carried the box to the kitchen table. Sarah was working a double shift at the hospital tonight, so at least I wouldn't have to explain this immediately. The box was locked. A simple padlock, but still, more weird. I found a pair of pliers and after a few minutes of struggling, managed to break the lock. Inside the box were photographs. Old black and white photos, the kind with the scalloped edges. They depicted people, mostly portraits. Stern-faced men in suits, women in high-necked dresses, children with wide, unsettling eyes. They all looked unhappy, oppressed even, and vaguely familiar, as if I'd seen them somewhere before. Beneath the photos was a stack of handwritten journals. Bound in leather, the pages brittle and yellowed with age. The ink was faded, but I could still make out the words. The first entry I read sent a chill down my spine. The house demands its due. We must continue the work, lest it awaken. The house. Was this about the building? I flipped through the other journals, finding similar passages. References to rituals, sacrifices, and a growing sense of dread. It was like something out of a bad horror novel. I told myself it was nothing, just some old, crazy person's ramblings, but the feeling of unease wouldn't go away. The next few days were a blur of obsessive research. I spent hours poring over the journals, trying to decipher the cryptic entries. I Googled historical records, looking for any mention of the building, the previous owners, anything that could shed some light on the room. I found newspaper articles about the building being erected in 1928. I found census records listing the names of the families who had lived here. And then I found something truly disturbing, an article from 1935. Local woman vanishes without a trace. The woman, a resident of this very building, had disappeared without a trace. No body, no leads, nothing. The case was never solved. And then I found another one. 1952, young man missing, police stumped. Another resident, another disappearance. The blood drained from my face. This wasn't just a coincidence. I started hearing things, faint whispers just at the edge of my hearing. Footsteps in the hallway when I knew I was alone. Shadows moving in the periphery of my vision. My sleep was non-existent. I'd drift off for an hour or two, only to be jolted awake by nightmares of dark figures and chanting voices. Sarah was getting worried. "Ethan, you need to stop this," she said one evening, her voice laced with concern. "This is unhealthy. You're not sleeping, you're not eating, you're barely functioning. It's just an old room with some old stuff. It doesn't mean anything." "It does mean something, Sarah," I insisted, my voice trembling. "People disappeared from this building. They vanished. And I think this room has something to do with it." She sighed. "Ethan, you're stressed. You're unemployed. You're letting your imagination run wild." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was happening, that I was close to uncovering something dark and dangerous. I started suspecting Mr. Abernathy, the building superintendent. He'd lived in the building for over 40 years. He knew everything about it. He was always lurking in the hallways, his eyes watching me. I tried to talk to him, to subtly probe for information. "Mr. Abernathy, do you know anything about the history of the building? Any strange occurrences?" He just smiled, a creepy, unsettling smile. "This old building has seen a lot, son. A lot of comings and goings. Have you ever heard anything about people disappearing?" His smile vanished. "Best not to dwell on the past," he said, his voice low. And then he walked away, leaving me standing there, shivering. One night I found something new in my apartment, a small bone carving. It was shaped like a grotesque figure with twisted limbs and a skull-like face. It was lying on my nightstand. I hadn't put it there. My paranoia ratcheted up another notch. I was being watched. I was being manipulated. I went back to the journals, desperate for answers. I noticed a recurring symbol, a spiral within a circle. I started seeing it everywhere, in the patterns of the wallpaper, in the cracks in the sidewalk, even in the foam in my coffee. One of the journals mentioned a sub-basement, a hidden level beneath the building that wasn't on any official plans. It was accessed through a secret passage in the main basement. I spent hours searching the basement, moving boxes, peering into dark corners. Finally, I found it, a section of the wall that looked slightly different from the rest. I pressed on it, and a section of the wall slid open, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. The air in the sub-basement was thick and heavy, thick with the scent of mold and decay. The only light came from my flashlight, which cut a feeble swat through the gloom. The room was larger than I expected. Stone walls, a dirt floor, and a low ceiling that forced me to hunch over. In the center of the room was a circle drawn on the floor made of some kind of dried substance. Around the circle were candles, burnt down to stubs, and then I saw it, a photograph, lying on the floor face down. I picked it up. It was a picture of the people who had disappeared. The woman from 1935, the man from 1952, and several others I hadn't found in my research. They were all standing in this room inside the circle. Their faces were blank, devoid of emotion. On the back of the photograph was a name, Mr. Abernathy. A voice behind me made me jump. "I see you found my little sanctuary." I turned around. Mr. Abernathy was standing at the entrance to the sub-basement, a wicked smile on his face. "What is this place?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "This is where we keep the old gods happy," he said, his eyes gleaming. "This building, it's a conduit, a gateway, and it needs to be fed." "You killed them," I said, my voice rising. "You killed all those people." "They were sacrifices," he said, his voice calm. "Necessary sacrifices to keep the building healthy." He lunged at me, a rusty pipe wrench in his hand. I dodged the blow and scrambled back, my heart pounding. We fought in the darkness, a desperate, brutal struggle. He was stronger than I expected, but I was fueled by adrenaline and fear. I managed to knock the pipe wrench out of his hand and, with a desperate surge of strength, pushed him to the ground. I scrambled out of the sub-basement and slammed the hidden door shut, jamming a piece of wood into the mechanism to keep it closed. I ran back to my apartment and called the police. Detective Mallory arrived, a weary-looking woman with a cynical expression. She listened to my story, her eyebrows raised. "A secret room, a sub-basement, ritual sacrifices, Mr. Miller. Are you sure you haven't been watching too many movies?" The police searched the building, but they found nothing conclusive. They found the sub-basement, they found the circle, they found the burnt-out candles. But they didn't find any bodies, and Mr. Abernathy was gone, vanished. Detective Mallory told me they would investigate, but she made it clear she thought I was delusional. Sarah was even more worried. "Ethan, please, you need to get help. This is beyond anything I can handle." I was alone. I went back to the journals, desperate for something, anything, to prove I wasn't crazy, and then I found it. A final entry written in a shaky hand. "The final offering will be made on the winter solstice. The house awakens then. The cycle begins anew." The winter solstice. It was in 2 days. I waited, consumed by dread. I barely ate, barely slept. I armed myself with a baseball bat and barricaded the door. On the night of the solstice, the building seemed to hold its breath. The radiators were silent, the floorboards still. An unnatural quiet descended. Then the lights flickered and died. A cold wind swept through the apartment, even though the windows were closed. I heard scratching noises in the walls, faint whispers in the darkness. I peered out the window. A figure was standing across the street, shrouded in shadow. It was too far away to make out any details, but I just knew it was watching me. Suddenly, I heard a thud. A brick had fallen from the wall near the fireplace, revealing the dark rectangle of the secret room, or was it always there? The scratching grew louder. The whispers intensified, and then a single word carried on the wind, "Ethan."